Amy, the entire nation seems to want a federal response. Does Chatham House feel that, whether it's the United States or any other country you study, that pandemics can be relieved by a federal response versus a more state and local response?
Absolutely. So the federal government needs to put in place the protocols and the expectations and provide guidance. Now, the states are going to implement, but if you don't have a common set of standards across the country, states are going to implement differently. And because of the nature of travel across the United States, that creates a vulnerability right there.
I mean, what's so fascinating about this is if the president has done what he's done, whatever you think about the politics, his actions are there, including his criticisms of the World Health Organization as well. Who takes over the federal response in a vacuum?
Well, I mean, we're not seeing anyone really emerge here, right? People do trust Dr. Fauci, and for good reason. He has been managing responses to various outbreaks for decades across different administrations, is not a political actor. But Dr. Fauci isn't really being given the leeway to do what he needs to do in response. Likewise, we're not seeing the leadership we need from the Centers for Disease Control. And so you see a couple of examples of governors who've been leading, but obviously a governor from New York or a governor from Washington State is ill-prepared to impose restrictions on Texas or Florida or anywhere else that's outside of its jurisdiction. And so right now we're just seeing the vacuum basically not being filled, and as a result, some confusion and increasing cases in the United States.
Amy, good morning from London. Who can fill that vacuum, or who will fill that vacuum?
Well, that's the problem. I think the situation we're seeing right now is creating a roadmap without a clear end in sight. And so if you don't have, the federal government is meant to fill that vacuum, and there isn't a natural leader otherwise to do so. And so that is what's so troubling about where we are in the U.S. right now. There's not an obvious candidate. There's no one who has the credibility, and there's no one who has the authority to impose a set of restrictions or protocols across various states, especially with different political actors. So that's a significant vulnerability for the country as a whole, because there isn't another natural actor that can fill in when the federal government isn't stepping up.
Amy, what does this all mean for the election come in November? I know it's a long time away, but yet it's also around the corner.
Yeah, I think this is something the president should be paying attention to. There are some troubling polls that have been coming out. The first, if you look at senior citizens, which is a population the president has relied on in the past to win election in the first instance, support within the senior citizen community is eroding, and that makes good sense because they're most at risk of contracting the virus and having very serious repercussions as a result of it. And the president's failure to establish leadership looks like a failure to protect them. Likewise, I think there's troubling reports in various states that we would expect to be much more favorably disposed toward the president. Places like Florida, places like Arizona. The poll suggests that he's losing support in those states, and that's bad news for him. We had thought this would be about the battlegrounds of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, but right now those states are favorably polling for Joe Biden.
Will that be a catalyst? I mean, the critical question on a Monday morning, Amy Pope, is given the cases growth, which is, folks, frightening, or even the death growth, which is not as dominant as the cases growth, is there an urgency that you detect by both parties, and particularly by Republicans, to get it going on a Monday morning? I don't, in my reading, see that urgency.
No, but if I am a governor sitting in a place like Texas, I would be putting a lot of pressure on the federal government, on the president to step up, because ultimately the response to the virus is not a political issue. It should not be partisan. It is just about competence. And so it really doesn't matter. There's not a Republican way of responding. There's not a Democratic way of responding. There is just a way of responding. And so the country needs to unify. In some ways, it provides the perfect platform for the president to demonstrate leadership skills And it's puzzling that he's failed to pick up on the opportunity that's been presented to him. It's a hard, no matter who's sitting in that chair in the Oval Office, it is a very hard problem to solve. But sending out mixed messages, putting the responsibility on governors, refusing to own the problem and the solution at the executive level, all of that, I think, undermines his leadership as a whole and really puts a question in the mind of voters.